I think we're live now, actually. In case we weren't live before, I do see the time now. This is very exciting. Bless you, Michelle. So if you're just joining us, welcome, welcome this Saturday afternoon. We have amazing guests. They're all smiling, happy, and adorable, myself not included. So if you're coming in, grab a seat, grab a snack. They're all fresh. And we look forward to talking momentarily. We'll get started in just a minute and a half. In the meantime, as usual, say hi. Let us know where you're from. Hi from Athens, Georgia. Hello, Athens again. I always bring up REM when Athens pops up on the screen. Hometown of Michael Stipe. We like Athens. So yeah, definitely come on, say where you're coming from. We'd love to give you a shout out. So hi, Whitney in Athens. Are you at UGA? Howdy from Dallas. Hey, Crystal from Dallas. I was born in Houston. Hi from Debbie in Massachusetts.
Hi,
Actually,
Debbie.
Crystal, I went to SMU in Dallas, so I am familiar. Jelly Bean is back. What's up, Jelly? Yes, I work there. Oh, cool. You work at UGA. Very cool. Des Moines, Iowa. Hi, Taylor. Sharon in Miami. Welcome to Miami. I used to live in Coral Springs. We have TTY Smith from Louisiana. Hey, is this the place to comment? It is the place to comment. Jacksonville, Sharon from Turkey. How are things in Turkey? Fellow Texans unite. Absolutely. Ashley near Kim and Michelle coming to us from Orange County, the OC. Bill from St. Louis. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome this beautiful Saturday afternoon. At least it's a gorgeous day where I'm at. Things are nice in the West Coast from what I hear from Kim and Michelle. Haven't gotten the weather report from Massachusetts yet, but I think Lisa's happy to tune in.
It's beautiful here.
It's beautiful. So
sunny. Yeah. Is it nice in Natick? Person from Natick whose name is up the list now? It's nice down here in Sandwich.
Sandwich?
And Boston. Yes, it's really Sandwich. That's where I am.
I didn't know that.
It's not a joke.
Yeah, Debbie, how's the weather in Natick? We got St. Louis, we got Illinois, Barbara and Bill. Peter's in Boston. Wow, Yap is from Malaysia. Welcome, welcome all the way from Malaysia. Hope you're staying safe. All right, well, we're 2 minutes in, so I think we should get this party started. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your Saturday afternoon, whatever time may be. There's an earthquake in Massachusetts right now. Lisa's getting a little shaky. We're good now. But thank you for joining us. We're changing today's town hall around just a wee bit, so I'm super excited. Obviously, we're all going through this process. It is a process. We're going through it together. We're all feeling a wide range of emotions, thoughts, and feelings. And above all, we are all here to support each other and one another. And we always love to continue these town halls to provide thoughts, ideas, concepts, skills, and tools and suggestions. So today, we really wanted to examine self-compassion and self-care as it relates to our day. We are all in completely different circumstances, whether you're currently quarantined alone or with your significant other, whether you're a family or with your family or a child, or you have many children, or you're an essential worker coming home to an empty house or a family. Every situation is unique. We are all in unique circumstances. However, everything we're all experiencing is the same in a rare way. We all have a very common struggle right now, which is facing this COVID-19. And we've all been asked to do certain things. And because of that, no matter your particular circumstance, there are all skills and tools we can all use as being human beings and individuals that can help us cope and manage the current circumstances, no matter what that unique situation is. So ultimately, we can't be supportive of others unless we support and we show up for ourselves. So I want to pose the general question, which are, what are ways we can do that during this time? What are ways we can show up for ourselves, both in mind and body, that will not only allow us to cope and survive during this time, but maybe even thrive? Definitely not a perfect science. The process isn't going to be perfect, nor should it be perfect. But equipped with certain skills and tools, we can all put ourselves in a better place to manage. I would suggest to everyone that's currently joining to take some notes if you so choose. Unlike the previous times, we really want to give everyone actionable items and takeaways that you can immediately start using in your daily life the minute you hear them. Unlike previous town halls, we won't be having a formal Q&A, but please feel free to ask questions. And if they pertain to the subject we're talking about, we'll integrate them. I also like to go back during the thread and answer questions as well after the fact. So please always feel free to weigh in with your thoughts. With that in mind, if you're just joining us, thank you. I appreciate it. I now want to get to our amazing guests who I feel so grateful to have. We'll start with just to my right, this person over here. We've got Michelle Massi LMFT. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Los Angeles area and has been treating OCD for 15 years. Michelle Massi was the Associate Clinical Director at the UCLA OCD Intensive Treatment Program, working one-on-one with patients as well as leading groups. In the past, Ms. Massi worked at the UCLA Childhood OCD, Anxiety and Tic Disorders Program, as well as the UCLA Adult Anxiety Research Program. Currently, Michelle has a private practice in Los Angeles, California, where she specializes in CBT to treat OCD, OC spectrum disorders, and other anxiety disorders in children's and teens. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. Just below Michelle, we have the incomparable Kimberly Quinlan. We have Kimberly Quinlan, who is also an LMFT. How embarrassing to show up with the same licensure. It's a good joke. I have to remember that. As a family therapist in the state of California and the founder of cbtschool.com, which we will put links to in the thread. It's an online psychoeducational platform that provides online courses for those with OCD and BFRBs who do not have access to mental health care. I know Kimberly's been giving away scholarships, so we can let her talk on that more later on as well. Kimberly is also the host of Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast, a podcast aimed at providing mindfulness-based tools for anxiety, depression, and BFRBs. We'll also provide a link to all of her podcasts. She's up to 100-something billion, and they're really helpful and really amazing. I've been a guest a couple of times. Finally, to her, to my down, we have, she's being very modest, but we have Dr. Lisa Coyne. She's the founder and senior clinical consultant of the McLean OCD Institute for Children and Adolescents at McLean Hospital, and is assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. She's the founder and director of the New England Center for OCD and Anxiety, and is on the faculty of the Behavioral Therapy Training Institute, otherwise known as the BTTI, of the International OCD Foundation. She's also a licensed psychologist and a peer-reviewed ACT, which is Acceptance Commitment Therapy Trainer. We will be talking a lot about ACT today. She has authored multiple articles and chapters on ACT with children and adolescents, and is a co-author of the books Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, A Clinician's Guide for Supporting Parents, The Joy of Parenting, and The Joy of Parenting. She also has new books, The ACT Guide to Teen Anxiety and OCD, and Stuff That's Loud, A Teen's Guide to Unspiraling When OCD Gets Noisy. All are expected out in 2020, which is this year. So thank you, Michelle, Lisa, and Kim, for joining. You can come off mute. This is a group conversation.
Ethan, did you see someone asking about like not using acronyms so that people who don't know the acronyms can follow along?
Yeah, they asked about BFRBs.
Yeah, body-focused repetitive behaviors.
Yeah.
So tics, skin picking, spin pulling. You guys wrote these bios. I was just reading. This isn't my fault. No, and I appreciate the comment actually. So thank you for that. We will definitely be actually having our first few questions, us make sure we identify terms that we'll be using throughout the process. But as Michelle is looking, she's got the comment thread down, but I will also be paying attention to the comment thread. So if you do have questions or are confused, definitely weigh in and comment, and we'll be happy to expand on what we're currently discussing. So if you're just joining us, thank you for being here. We're talking about self-compassion and self-care during the age of COVID-19. So with all of that, that was loud. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to start with Kim, and I'd like to sort of break down some of the things we'll be talking about before we get into the questions that a lot of people may or may not be experiencing. So Kim, a lot of people are talking a lot about self-compassion, and it sounds like we know what it is, but what exactly is self-compassion, and why is it so important right now?
Okay, so think of self-compassion as exactly what compassion is, but turned towards yourself. So if we were compassionate, let's say I was being compassionate towards Michelle and Ethan and Lisa, I would be wishing for their wellness. I would be very sensitive to their needs. I would want only loving kindness and wellness for them. And I would wish them well, right? I would have good intentions towards them, and I would treat them well. Self-compassion is actually all of that, just giving it to yourself. And it's really important because we've been really well taught to give it to other people, but we haven't been taught how to do it for ourselves.
That's great, Kimberly. Thank you. That was so short and sweet. I wasn't used to that. So self-compassion, that's in a nutshell, but it's actually it's a lot deeper than that. I know that I've been practicing of late self-compassion in my own work. Michelle is smiling because she is also my therapist, and she has been working on self-compassion with me. We have been working on the same workbook for a year and a half. We are halfway through it.
That might mean I'm a bad therapist. I don't know if I'd advertise.
It means that I'm bad at self-compassion, so it is self-compassion, although simple sounding, is a work in progress, and that's why I'm excited to talk about it today. Something else that I mentioned was ACT, or acceptance commitment therapy. So Lisa, can you help us better understand what acceptance commitment therapy, or ACT, is?
I will do my best.
Okay.
So ACT is it's a cognitive behavioral therapy where the stress is less about symptom reduction and more about looking at the things that you might avoid because they're uncomfortable and unpleasant, and what gets in the way, and looking at that as something that gets in the way of you building a life that you want. So it's very strength-based, and we assume everybody has what they need to build a life that they love, but that they might be stuck. So in the case of OCD, you might be stuck doing rituals. You might be stuck with fears that you need to address, or you feel that you need to address, and you're focused almost entirely on that instead of the things that you care most deeply about in your life. So maybe family, maybe doing things that you enjoy, maybe making a difference in the world, etc. And there's a big self-compassion piece in ACT. We call it acceptance. And so it's sort of allowing whatever feelings and thoughts that you have, holding them lightly, holding them gently, instead of, for example, beating yourself up for not doing something perfectly, which I am guilty of doing sometimes as well. So I guess, like Ethan, I guess I'm working on that too. Maybe we all stink at it. I don't know.
We can all take this time to work on this together. So that sounds good. Thank you, Lisa. So Michelle, for years we've been hearing the word mindfulness. It's a buzzword. There's tons of articles about mindfulness. It's very prominently used in the last few years, but specifically now, so what is mindfulness, and why is mindfulness practice particularly important right now?
Sure. So what I use to describe this to my clients is very short and simple. Mindfulness is being in the moment without criticizing. So it's noticing things without criticizing them, adding, I'm not doing it right. So we all think of mindfulness and breathing exercises, and we say, I can't do it. But the reality is, if you're noticing that you're struggling and your mind is wandering, you're being mindful. And so I think it works a lot with self-compassion, because we tend to, not focus on how well we can take care of ourselves, and we instead criticize the job that we're doing, that we're not doing it right or good enough. And I think mindfulness is just being present in the moment. There's so much, every time you turn on the news or hop on social media, there's new updates, there's people commenting, and it's just, we need to step back for a second and be in the moment without criticizing, without judging the moment.
Right. This is awesome. As we're all talking, some people are dropping some great truth. Roberta is dropping some great truth here. I always love this. I'll bring this up at the end, but I always welcome everyone to pay attention to the comment thread, because these are great opportunities for everyone to advocate and bring in their own personal experience and knowledge with all of these things. And so I always love what people are saying. Quickly, I have to give a shout out to Nikki, my friend in Ireland, in Dublin. You're busy painting the back wall. Delighted to be listening to you again, Ethan and guests. Always happy to see you, Nikki. I can't wait to come visit. And Roberta quickly said, be present in the moment and step back in the moment without criticizing and just be aware. So that's all great feedback. So in the past, our town halls have been very specific to OCD and ways in which OCD sufferers and the OCD community can cope and manage during this time, right? And this, I really wanted to focus on not only OCD, but the larger community as a whole, because what's really neat about self-compassion and mindfulness and ACT or acceptance commitment therapy is that you really don't need any type of mental illness to benefit from those modalities of treatment and those precepts. They're amazing things that you can take with you and utilize. So whether you're on here and you have OCD, or you're struggling with another mental illness, or you're just struggling with anxiety in life, because it's a really anxious time right now, and we're facing a lot. I really wanted we, the IOCDF, and Lisa, Michelle, and Kimberly, why do I have trouble with your name? It's a very...
and you say it all the time.
I know. And K-Dog over in the corner here.
Just call her KQ. That's what I call her.
Yeah,
KQ.
Exactly. We really wanted to be able to touch on tools and skills that anybody and everybody can utilize no matter what your circumstances are. So with that in mind, I kind of want to start at the beginning of the day. So I know lately when I wake up, first thing is I personally get this immediate feeling of dread and anxiety, which it feels very similar to when I was really struggling with OCD and like sleep was the only relief I was getting. And then I'd wake up and be like, oh God, the whole day's in front of me. How am I going to get through this? What am I? And then I get the sense of what am I waking up to? I immediately want to check the news or social media or see what's happened overnight, make sure I'm up to date. I think we're all waking up with some sense of anxiety. So what's the most healthy way to start the day off the bat that sort of sets ourselves up for mental health success? So let's start with Lisa on that.
Oh,
go ahead, Michelle. No, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, I was just going to say, my rule of thumb, even pre-COVID, and Ethan can speak to this, is that for the first hour of being up, don't get on social media, don't check email. I really focus, and this goes back to the mindfulness, I really focus on me and getting ready for the day. And this is just my everyday kind of thing. So I continue that with COVID, because if all of a sudden I first wake up and the first thing I do is turn on the news and hear all this information, or get on Facebook or Twitter and see all the comments of the people who, I'm in LA, so I'm 3 hours behind New York and all that's going on in the world, is that I'm hearing, everything that's been going on. And the first thing I do is, I'm dreadful. I add dread to dread. So that's my even pre-COVID days.
That's such helpful advice. And I want to say, I think it's important. I know we're going to talk about the beginning of the day, but I think it's really important to consider how much time we spend looking at COVID related or scary things, because when there's a threat in the environment, one of the things that happens is we tend to look for that everywhere in the environment. And it's really hard to avoid if you're on social media, if you're turning on stuff. So not just the beginning of the day, but think hard about, minimizing or limiting how much time you're spending looking at that stuff. And I'm not saying to avoid it. What I am saying, though, is to build in plenty of your time during your day to do other things. But for the beginning of the day, some days are harder for me to get up than others. And the days that are hard, hi Dawn, sorry, I'm having comments. One of the things that I notice that happens in my own mind, because I do practice everything that I teach in ACT. So I practice mindfulness, I practice acceptance. I'm not always so good at it. Nobody is good at it all the time. But it tends to be, I get in this argument with myself about, should I get out of bed? And then I start to run through or focus on or over-focus on all the hard things that I might have to do or that are going on in the world. And so one of the things, it's a really simple practice that you can try, is just before you get out of bed, just close your eyes, pause, breathe, and just check in with yourself. And whatever you notice, whatever thoughts, whatever feelings you notice, just breathe into them and think, like kind of tip your hat to them, acknowledge that they're there, and think, okay, got it. You know, that's it. Just simply make a space to notice. Okay. You don't have to do anything about it. You can just notice it. And if you're having the thought, like, I don't really want to get up. Yeah, got it. Today's going to be hard. Yeah, got it. Right. So on and so forth. So that's one of the things I do. I find it soothing and helpful. Maybe you guys will too.
That's awesome, Lisa.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Kim, I think that kind of plays into self-compassion and noticing. Can you speak a little bit?
Yeah, so the science behind self-compassion actually has a very strong mindful component. So basic self-compassion is just treating yourself kindly like you would anybody else. But the scientific way that we look at self-compassion is to do something very similar to what Lisa brought up, which is first to check in, right? And, you know, we have to check in to know how we need to fix the problem, right? But with self-compassion, it's actually very simple. The only thing we work with self-compassion is suffering. That's the only thing that we're there to tend to. With self-compassion, we could get very strategic and analytical, but the real work is going, okay, this is a moment of suffering, right? And acknowledging the pain that you have. It might be acknowledging the physical pain that you have. It might be acknowledging the collective pain that we have. Whatever it is, there's no right or wrong. And a big piece of this too is not comparing pain to pain, right? Not comparing suffering to suffering. I think that often people don't allow themselves to meet their own suffering because someone's suffering more than they are. And therefore they use that as a reason not to. And so really what we're looking for is all pain is pain. And all of it is, we should be giving permission to meet each and every suffering. It depends on your wording. Some people don't like the word suffering. Some people don't like the word pain. Some people don't like the word discomfort. Just pick the one that feels true to you. And then you're going to bring yourself a sense of loving kindness to that suffering. But the main thing to remember here is we're not trying to get rid of the suffering. We're not trying to make, you happy. We're not trying to make you not sad. We're here just to create this very tender, loving care, like a place to hold your pain whenever it's there.
I think you made a really good point, Kim, about the suffering part. It's good for any therapists who are checking in here today, because as therapists, we are so much that we feel like we need to take care of our clients, but we also need to give our space because we're also going through this whole COVID pandemic thing and trying to manage ourselves and our families. And for those therapists who are at home working with kids in the background and everything we've seen, it's important to that too. Somebody asked about how much mindfulness needs to be good. And I don't like that because that's too much of perfectionism. Really, any mindfulness is good. That, you can mindfully eat, you can mindfully shower. It's just being able to sit into the present moment. So there's not a specific amount of time that is going to make you better or that is perfect for being the best mindfulness person ever.
I love that. And can I add to that, Ethan, really quick?
Absolutely, of course.
So the other thing, and I wonder, I bet we all think about this the same way, Kim and Michelle, but I think it's really important also to think about mindfulness isn't about the outcome of mindfulness. It's about the practice, right? It's a practice. It's not a perfect practice. It's not supposed to make you feel good. It's not, as Kim said really well, it's not supposed to get rid of suffering. But it's a practice to bring you more in connection with yourself. And I love, Tara Brach said something about mindfulness that's really stuck with me. It's really simple to remember. And she said that suffering begins the moment we begin to wish the present moment is other than it is, right? So there's that sort of mindfulness piece. And it can be as brief as simply bringing your attention on purpose to something that you're doing, combing your hair, getting out of bed, looking at the buds on the trees. So
thank you, Lisa. And I actually want to follow up on Meg's Meg's question here, which is, Kim, can you further define what loving kindness is?
Yeah, sure. I saw that question. It's an interesting question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because everybody has their own version of this. And very much we bring our own childhood, we bring our own culture, we bring our own society into what we consider loving kindness. Think of the way, again, and I'll keep it reflecting to this, think of loving kindness as the feeling you get when you feel love for somebody else. So that's sort of let's do an exercise here. So if you were to bring to mind something you love, a person you love, it could even be a simple relationship like a pet that you have and you love. If you were to think about that and just really sort of allow that warmth to sort of nourish you in that moment, that would be a sense of loving kindness, right? From a more Buddhist perspective, loving kindness is the wishing well, right? So it's wishing for the wellness of that person, hoping for them to live with ease, wishing for them to have peace of mind. That there's two ways we can look at it. And again, I think this is where you can put your own individual wording to it. You can put your own individual, comfort with it. But again, it's ultimately feeling a sense of love and kindness and well-wishing.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. For those of you that are asking some questions, there's very specific on resources. The IOCDF, I saw, is the International OCD Foundation. There are tons of resources. I know some people are asking about BPD, OCD, depression, anxiety, PTSD, skin picking resources. You can definitely go to the website. We will also provide other resources as well in the comment thread. So if you're asking. So, okay. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, and for parents that are on the thread. So a lot of parents are waking up and facing a day of work, educating their children, taking care of their families, and many people, whether you're a parent or not, are having to take on new roles in addition to the roles they were already playing. So with so much more on so many people's plates, how can we approach each day without immediately feeling overwhelmed and not wanting to bury our heads under the covers? Go ahead, Lisa.
So we've been talking about this all week. I work on a group of a sort of a coalition of other behavioral scientists who are really concerned about the pressures that parents are being put under. And it's such a challenge. And I've seen so many posts about here's how you can manage your day and here's how you can perfectly educate. And I was saying to Ethan yesterday, I kind of want to write a blog, and I would call it Dear Parents, it's okay to call bull blank, I don't know if there's kids watching this, so I'm not going to curse. Anyway, so I think the first thing is you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to be a superhero. And no one is going to get it right all the time. And I think that there are many, many things you can do to ease your day in terms of setting up schedules and being positive with your kids and making family time. But I think the biggest thing is, if we think about this, is think about the analogy of like when you're on an airplane, you're always taught, put on your own mask first, then you help your kids. So I think to the degree that you can be gentle with yourself, make sure you're taking care of yourself, that you're getting as much sleep as you can, you're eating well, so connect socially with your friends if you can, even if it's online, which it is for I think all of us. And I'm sure we can I'd love to see in the feed like any creative things you guys are doing to connect online. That would be awesome. But take care of yourself and then take care of your kids, because the secondary benefit of that is, of course, you're modeling. Kids learn through watching you. So if they see you taking good care of yourself, they will learn it, and that will come out as they age.
It's really nice, Lisa. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So something, Michelle and Kim, I'll throw this out to you. Something that I deal with in my own work is like when I'm slammed and I have responsibilities, my mind will immediately go, no, you don't have time to take care of yourself right now. You have this to do. You got to do this. Even though I know that a 20-minute walk would be really beneficial for me, I always talk myself out of it. I mean, do we all deserve self-compassion? Do we all deserve taking time for ourselves? And should that be something that we make time for, especially right now?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So much to what Lisa just said, we do have to put the mask on us before we can help a child or anybody out on the street, or, you know, anyone who else is suffering. So absolutely, that is the case. The way that I look at it is there's only a certain amount of hours in each day, right? And we used to fit in what we used to fit in during those waking hours. And now we've been asked to fit in more. For those of you who don't have children, you've been asked to fit in more because now you have the weight of this pandemic on your shoulders. And so the time you had, we're actually trying to put double in that period. And so what we really first need to do is be radically accepting of the fact that we can't do all this in this much time. That will be an unhealthy step, right? If you chose to do that. Now, for me, I like to do things super de-duper well.
Really well.
I love that
That's a nice way
word,
of saying
super
it, Kim.
duper.
Right? That's well.
And so I like to be a good mom, and I like to be a good therapist, and I try to be a good wife. You know, all of the things. But given that I have radically accepted, like I'm going to be honest with myself, radically accepted that I can't fit all that in there, I'm going to, again, just meet the discomfort and the pain that comes up during that. It might be shame, right? You might have shame show up because, you know, you might now have these thoughts like I'm a bad mom, or you might have guilt because, as I've experienced myself, my daughter really doesn't want me to go to work right now. She wants me to color all day, and so I have to be practice and make space for the guilt if I feel any. So whatever's happening there, I think the work here is really recognizing and being honest with yourself what you can fit in. And to speak to what Ethan said, absolutely, you will crash and burn if you don't take care of yourself. And I think you will learn that very, very quickly. And I think our bodies tell us and give us messages of when we need a timeout, needs to take it a little slower.
Amen.
And again, I think I just want to bring this back to, I think I keep saying even pre-COVID, because these are all skills you can use anytime. I work with a lot of stay-at-home moms or even moms at work, and they're always asking me, how do you get everything done? The reality is we just don't, is that we make a to-do list and we try our best. And as Kim is famous for saying at our conference, we're going to work towards a B average today, or even a B minus. See, I listened, Kim. Is that we're not going to be able to do it perfectly. We're not going to be able to get through everything. And, you know, one day maybe the dishes won't get done, or your child won't get their math done. And something I was going to add, but I also saw it come up in the comments, is to remember that everything is a learning opportunity. You making a meal and having your kid help cut up, if they're age appropriate, cut up the veggies, or read you the recipe. That in itself is a learning experience. They're practicing their reading skills. They're practicing maybe even science. Go on a nature walk and point out the things that they see. That's practicing mindfulness. So it doesn't have to be what we think of as general specific learning.
That's great, Michelle. Thank you. And again, I urge everyone to make sure to read all the comments. People are dropping great advice. Roberta's saying some great things. People are making a lot of suggestions on virtual things that they've been doing, whether a Zoom meeting with families. People have been having virtual medicine sessions. Believe it or not, I had a virtual urology session. That was kind of weird. I won't go into details. It's a true story. It was super
hilarious.
awkward. Yeah. The Zoom feature on the camera is very helpful. Anyway, so real quick before I move on to the question, and before Roberta yells at me, because I appreciate everything she's saying, she hasn't asked this yet. So, Kim, can you further explain what radical acceptance is?
Sure. So let's say you feel, I'm going to speak to emotions, right? So let's say you feel sad. I think that, as COVID-19 came in, we were all in a state of panic, right? And as I've watched this taper and flow up and down as a clinician, what I do see now is that we're moving into a stage of grief, right? Whether you're grieving the loss of the life you had, or the life you think you were going to have, or the loss of a loved one, there is some grief. So when we have sadness and grief, right, in the moment, often what we do is we try not to feel that, right? Acceptance is allowing it to be there. It's saying, okay, it's basically doing a very slow, like, yes, I'm going to say yes to this, just like Lisa said before. And so first, that is just basic acceptance. I accept that I am sad. I am accepting I am sad because of this situation. And I'm accepting that it's okay that I feel this way, right? Radical acceptance is, think of it like acceptance on steroids. It's ultimately saying, I'm going to radically allow this to be my truth, and I'm not going to try and change it for the future. I'm going to allow it to flow and do whatever it wants in my body. I'm radically, like, think of it as just as you would think, radically, I'm going to embrace this feeling. I'm going to love the fact that I feel this. Not that you'll enjoy it, but you'll send, again, loving kindness to the fact that, wow, this is a painful moment. So think of, again, so it's sort of like tiers, right? You have avoidance and resistance, and then you have acceptance. Then you have radical acceptance, which is, you know, in simple terms, it's bring it on.
Radical acceptance is just acceptance in the 80s, right? It's just rad acceptance.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So I'm going to keep going. Pammy, by the way, suggests making meals is a great opportunity to be mindful, focus on all the sights, the smells, step of things, unless you're a terrible cook, and then don't do that. Pammy, hi, I hope you're doing well, and welcome. Again, people are leaving great comments. So I'm gonna throw this to Kim, of course, open it up to everyone. So chances are we're gonna have a variety of thoughts during the day as it relates to our present circumstances. Can't control our thoughts, can't control our feelings, and thoughts don't necessarily equal reality nor action, but it's so easy to get stuck on a thought, and thus really creating uncomfortable feelings and potentially dictating our actions if we so choose. So what are ways we can not get stuck on or trapped on painful or scary thoughts that may or may not happen?
Right. Well, I would actually.
I said Lisa.
Yeah, I would actually ask Lisa. Yeah.
You said
I know, I'm too busy
you did
thinking.
say Kim.
Did I say Kim?
You did.
But
I'm a terrible moderator.
No, I was going to host it for you and be like, no, that's her question.
I totally meant
Over
Lisa.
here.
I'm trying to get my teenager to come and say hi to you, and he's like, no. I'm sorry.
No, that's all. I can answer that on the end of it, but I would.
Yeah, no, I totally meant Lisa, actually. I'm
You're
sorry.
so funny. You forgot all about me. Then I'm
I did.
I'm having the thought. Okay. So so first of all, we have, I think it's 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And I want you to imagine, what if you had 40 to 70,000 of anything that you're trying to do something with? Wouldn't you be exhausted? Right? So I am too. And it's really difficult when you it's really easy to get stuck on thoughts that are negative. And when we say stuck, can you guys hear me? I'm having like okay.
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm having an echo. It's weird. Anyway, when you get stuck on a thought, it's kind of like, it can feel like this, like you're in the middle of doing some daily activity, and then all of a sudden you're not there anymore. Because you're in your mind worrying about the future, or ruminating about maybe something that's happened in the past. And so there are different things you can do about this. The first thing I would say from an ACT perspective is simply notice, slow down. And if you're starting to feel stressed or anxious, notice, what was I just thinking? What was that? Right? No need to argue with it. No need to disprove it. No need to, change it, but just simply notice it. Right? And another thing that's helpful, and this is really one of the simplest sort of exercises we might do and ACT about this, is just label it as a thought. So I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I don't know what Ethan thinks about what I just said, for example, right? And slow it down and just kind of look at it, and then look for what's the next thought that's going to arise on the heel of that. So in so doing, you notice that I'm not talking about changing what you're thinking. I'm talking about noticing the process of your thinking and making space for it, very much in the way Kim described, using radical acceptance, right? These are thoughts, these are mental phenomena, and it may feel extremely compelling or true. We call that fusion, or we can call it thought action fusion, right? But if we treat them just like their mental phenomena, like their thoughts, you have a little bit of a different perspective. And so I'd encourage you guys to get curious about what happens when I do that and see.
I'm gonna, before Kim follows up, the real Kim, just quickly.
The real
Lisa,
Kim?
The real Kim.
Am I fake Kim now?
You're fake Kim. Yeah. I wanted to follow up because you talked about fusion, and Marissa asked or said, I found thought diffusion to be really helpful. Can you speak a little bit on diffusion
Sure.
and what that is?
Yeah, so diffusion is exactly what I was describing, kind of treating your thoughts as though they're thoughts. Because sometimes thoughts are really useful, right? And sometimes it's really helpful to get stuck on them. But hold on, all my children have just walked into the room. Do you guys want to be on the town hall with me? See, this is how okay, so this is a good example. If they were thoughts and I just left you guys like that and I was in the middle of my thoughts, it would look just like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice that they're there, and I'm going to notice that I can either talk to them or I can not talk to them. That's diffusion. So I'm diffusing from my children.
She's very good at it.
All right, and a quick diffusion exercise. This is a simple one if you want to do one. Think about a thought that you might have. A lot of our thoughts are negative. You guys may or may not have noticed this, but the ones that we tend to be negative, and they're the ones that we get stuck on. So you might think about a thought that's maybe a negative evaluation you have about yourself. Okay, something small. You don't need to say anything about it. And just take a second and notice that thought. Now I want you to add this stem to it. I'm having the thought that, and say it slowly to yourself. And now add, I notice I'm having the thought that, and then finish the sentence. And finally, I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that, ... And so if you've done that exercise, congratulations, that's awesome. You weren't struggling with that thought. In fact, you chose deliberately to have that thought for probably 30 seconds. That's acceptance in a way, right? But it's also diffusion. You may have noticed that there's you and then there's the thought. So there's a little bit of distance between you as the thinker or the observer of the thought and the thought itself. It doesn't change it, but it does make it slightly easier to carry. And so you're starting to teach yourself and teach your mind that you don't have to respond to thoughts all the time. You can choose. I'm going to mute because there's activity here.
That's my absolute favorite thought diffusion. I do it with all my clients, and it's just so amazing.
I actually use it all the time. And my tag is, if I'm feeling stressed and I don't know why, that happens a lot, especially these days, I'm like, what was I just thinking? Because I know it's probably some thought that I had that I didn't even notice. Mm-hmm. And so I'll slow it down. I'll do that. That's why I use that one all the time. Yeah.
Kim, do you have anything to add to?
Not specifically. I mean, of course, we can, following what Lisa said, we can always, frost that with a nice sense of self-compassion. And, that you can, the way I always explain it is, you can make a self-compassion sandwich whenever you want. You can do it before, and then you can do the activity, and then you can put your top lid of self-compassion on top. So you can do it, a self-compassion sandwich is really fun, right? The thing that really comes up for me that I would want to speak to is, I think so much we get stuck on thoughts, whether they're, intrusive thoughts or stress, is we usually get stuck on it because we have judged it in some way as bad. Right? We've told ourselves this is bad, right? So often, a lot of the time, we are, a fear might arise, and then we have this very fast thing that happens in our brain, which is no, fear's bad, right? And so what I often do with my clients is similar to what Lisa said, is to slow it down. And this is a story. I'll keep it really quick, but I'll tell you a story of 2 arrows. The story goes like this. There is a man, a hunter. I'm just, culturally, this might be appropriate for everyone, but let's say there is a hunter out in a field and he's hunting for berries for his family, right? And all of a sudden, he gets hit in the leg by an arrow. And he's like, like, what is happening, right? Because he wasn't expecting it, right? But then as soon as that happens, a few milliseconds afterwards, he then goes, you idiot. Why did you let that happen? You should have been recognizing that. You should have had your eyes on. There's somebody here. You could have been doing this better, right? Now, what's happened here is he got hit by the first arrow, but then he's hit himself with a second metaphorical arrow, a second level of pain, which is that sort of self-judgment, right? So the second arrow, metaphorically, was the one he gave himself. And often, or I would say more than often, the biggest pain comes from that second arrow. Often the second arrow is more painful than the actual event. And so as you move through the day, just be aware, even if you do get stuck on a thought, is to catch whether the thought is the first arrow, on whether you're actually, putting in a second arrow because of that.
I love that.
And Lisa, people love your dog as well. Thank you, Kim. That was really good. I like that a lot too. So Michelle, just piggybacking on this, if I'm in the middle of my day and I suddenly get an overwhelming feeling like I can't handle it, or what if everything goes to poo-poo? What are some ways I can bring myself back to the present moment? And as a follow-up, is coming back to the present moment mean we're going to feel better?
Great questions, Ethan. So first off, I'm going to answer the second one first. No, we're not attempting, my clients hate when I say this, but I always say the purpose of exposure therapy isn't to feel better. It's learning to tolerate the anxiety. And that's the same thing here. Mindfulness isn't about feeling better. Mindfulness is bringing awareness to the experience you're having and to recenter yourself. You may still feel really bad. The COVID's not going to go away. The minute you do a mindfulness exercise, you're not going to be back with your friends. Like, that all isn't going to go away just because you did a mindfulness exercise, and your anxiety is not going to go away. But it may recenter you and help you sort of back to what Lisa was saying with the thought diffusion, is recognizing, I was having these thoughts that got me into this spiral. Some exercises you can do. One of my favorite exercises is just naming your 5 senses, and you can do it in any order, but using your sight and your hearing and your taste and your smell and your touch to ground yourself back in the moment. Take a minute. If you can, step outside. If you have a little patio or backyard, if you don't, you can do it in your house, but just take a look around and give yourself a few minutes to notice what is in your surroundings, right? What do you smell? Is there food cooking? Are there things that remind you of your childhood? Are you eating something? Can you taste it? What can you feel? I like to play with my hair. Ethan, I'll tell you about that in therapy. I do this a lot. It's very soft. It grounds me, and take that opportunity to bring yourself back to the present moment. You can also just do some breathing exercises. And before someone asks, there's no right way to do a breathing exercise. Any way that gets you air in and air out, whether you like to do it through your nose and out your mouth, through your nose and out your nose, as long as you're, just sort of focusing on that breath and taking a moment. Some people like to do square breathing, which is sort of following a square while you inhale and exhale. So you're going to inhale and, sort of draw a line in your mind. You're going to hold it as it goes across, and you're going to exhale as it comes down, and you're going to hold it as it goes across. And you're just going to keep following that. If you like to put on some music in the background, I have some of my favorite artists, and I have a Spotify station and a Pandora station. My favorite is Jack Johnson. I'll throw that on and just have that in the background because Ethan's like, I cannot be your patient anymore. It just relaxes me. It brings me back. I listened to a lot of Jack Johnson in college. It brings me back to happy times with friends and good memories. And so I start to sing along, and then I'm not really focused on what is in the moment. So those are some of my favorites. One thing I want to add as a description, and one of my favorite descriptions is if you think about a school bus and you think about a school bus driver. Most of us are not riding school buses right now, but if you think about a school bus, is that I know as a kid, we were not sitting in the background like this, really quiet with our legs crossed and just like that, right? We were sitting there, we were screaming, we were throwing things at each other, we were like singing and like pounding. And that bus driver still has to drive the bus from point A to point B, wherever we were going, whether it was camp to Disneyland or school to a museum. That bus driver has to get us there no matter how loud the kids are in the background. And so we are the bus drivers of our lives. And those loud kids in the background are our thoughts. And so we can still do things even with those thoughts and those screaming children and pounding music in the background. So that's just one of my metaphor was the word I was looking for. That's one of my favorite ACT metaphors.
I love that. And I want to add too that like I noticed when I first started learning how to be mindful and pay attention on purpose, and I think of it as simply as that. One of the things that would happen is all of a sudden my mind would jump in and start criticizing how I was paying attention and that I sucked at it and this was stupid and how am I going to do it and what am I supposed to get out of it? And I just noticed that even just bringing my attention to my five senses triggered my mind to be very critical. And so what I want to say to you guys is that's normal. If that happens, that's okay. Sometimes you'll notice that your mind is like a puppy on a leash, and it's going to pull you up and out, and it's a process, and so it'll be this process where you'll get pulled up and out of your mindful space, and then when you notice that, gently bring yourself back, but make a space for that process to be imperfect and messy, because it just is, and just keep practicing. And one of my favorite times, I don't think we talked about this yet, it's good to bring your attention to little small daily activities that you're doing during the day, right? Things you enjoy, just routines. And then one of my favorite things to do too is to really notice when I'm with people that I care about. Am I really with them? Am I being mindful? Am I really there? And sometimes it can be just this very brief, fleeting, few seconds long practice of what am I paying attention to? And bringing my attention back on purpose to what I want to be attending to.
I love that. Lisa, you also brought something up in an earlier town hall, which I loved because I used it myself, which is it's okay to be messy. It's okay to be messy and do this messy and engage in action-oriented values messy. I know that when I was, trying to regain my life with OCD and my emotions were dysregulated and I was crying all the time, and I was like, well, I can't go to work or I can't go out because I'm upset and I'm crying. So I can't do that. And it's like, no, you have to be willing to be messy and cry and still do the things that you love. So, we don't have to do these things perfectly. We can allow ourselves to go out with these uncomfortable feelings and do anyway. Just like go ahead, Lisa.
It's funny that you should say, I was thinking as you guys were talking, I was brought back to, a few years ago, actually twice now, I went on a couple of treks to Nepal in the Himalayas. And the first one was to base camp. And I am not like, I'm more fit now than I was then, but like, I'm really not like an athlete or anything like that at all. And I was kind of scared that I could do it at all. And like, it was so hard. It was like 8, 9, 10 hours a day of just pain, of just walking. And you can't really breathe because the oxygen is so thin. And I learned a lot about being really messy. I was almost always the slowest one in the group. Like it was ridiculous. I held everybody back. And it was what it was. And it was an amazing experience. But it taught me a lot about like, well, you can either how do you keep going when things are hard, and what do you pay attention to, and how do you just carry yourself gently when things are hard and messy, as Ethan said?
Kim, anything to add?
I think that the only thing I would add, because these guys nailed it, is I think that when we're practicing these tools, it's very easy to get frustrated, right? Because, the way that I originally understood mindfulness practice is like we're the river, right? And the thoughts are rocks, right? So the river comes and it hits a rock, and it doesn't like scream at the rock and be like, what are you doing here, right? It's just like, oh, there's a rock and it goes around, right? And mindfulness is that practice where it's like a practice of being like water. It just sort of goes with the flow, to use that term. I think what happens is when we're practicing being mindful, we hit a rock and which we would conceptualize as a thought or a feeling or a sensation, whatever it may, or COVID, like whatever it may be, is we hit it and we try to negotiate how we're going to get around it first. Like, I'll go over it. Maybe I'll go, we're trying to negotiate, and then we do it and we successfully get past it. But then there's another rock and we go, okay, this is cool. Michelle and Lisa taught me my tools, so I'm going to do it. And they hit the rock. Oh, okay, I'm just going to go around it and be, but then before long, we've actually turned ourselves this way and we're like, oh my God, look at how many rocks I'm going to have to face today. Like, you're looking down the river and you're like, I'm never going to make it through. Mm-hmm. And so the work, if you're noticing that frustration, is to just do one rock at a time. Just give yourself permission to suck at doing this rock and then suck at doing the next rock. Because that's the only, like I said, that's the only way we're going to get through this, right? Is if we just give ourselves permission. Can I use the word suck?
Mm-hmm. Lisa already did, so she lowered the bar.
Okay. All right. So, sorry, my mental filter just stepped in. So
stop judging yourself, Kim.
No, I'm thinking like children. I don't know who's here. I think that if we can be realistic, we will you'll suck at things, and that's fine. Yeah. But just suck at one thing at a time.
So I love that. Suck at one thing at a time.
That's awesome.
I'm a multitasker.
That might be my motto for life, Kim. Just try to suck at one thing at a time.
I speak wisdom.
That's going to be the title of Kim's new book.
That's a great book title.
I'm totally copywriting.
Hey, you guys in the comments, don't you think Kim should write that book?
Well, Stacey already said we should write a book together.
Well, we have the title.
So I'm going to stick with Kim for a second, and I'm going to actually get
the real Kim
for these questions. The real Kim, the real Kim Shady. Yeah, it rhymes with slick. Okay.
I am the Kim Shady. Oh my God.
So water is inherently flexible. We talk about it just moves where it needs to go, and so. Everything seems to be changing moment to moment. And I know whether you have OCD or you don't, it'd be so much easier if we just had a set of guidelines, a list of 10 that we could all follow, that we know would keep us safe and feeling protected. But there aren't. So how important is flexibility right now?
Oh, that's a Lisa question. But all I will add here is psychological flexibility is all her, right?
I know, going with the water.
But okay, I'll take it.
She's thinking about sucking later, so go ahead.
No, so I think that we can get very rigid, right? We can, and this I was just going to mention, the most common question I hear in my practice is, when is this going to end?
Yeah.
We want a date. We want to know when this is going to be over. And I don't blame you, right? Because for me, if I know when the end date is, I can wrap my head on how to manage, right? I can wrap myself around like, well, that's cool. I've got this many weeks and I'll do this many things and so forth. But when we don't have an end date, it can feel like we're just like flipping out, right? We're just going all over. To come back to this sucking at one thing at a time, you have to, the only way we can stay flexible is to just suck at one thing at a time or do one thing at a time. Because as soon as we think, when we're in a situation that is uncertain, that nobody knows the outcome of, we're going to have to, that we're only left with this idea of just taking it with each throw. I'm not going to prepare for anything beyond Wednesday, right? That's as far as I feel is appropriate for me to plan. Probably more likely will just be today because I don't know, right? But the flexibility there is giving myself permission to be uncertain, right? To allow that uncertainty to be in this space in which we live. And so, you know, that's my piece on flexibility, mostly given that the degree of uncertainty that we have.
I love that. And one of the things that I notice is that when humans do not like uncertainty at all. You know, it's especially hard if you're struggling with OCD, but none of us really like it. We prefer life in neat little bento boxes, right? So one of the ways I like, from an ACT perspective, I think of flexibility as noticing that you still can choose your direction no matter what scary thing or hard thing is going on. And so one way to think about it now with COVID is, you know, the inflexible part is maybe this, you know, attachment to, we need an endpoint. We need to know, right? And I think we all feel that. So we can continue to engage in that. That's not going to bring us any kind of certainty. We could try, but the other thing we could do is notice that we're doing that, notice that we're attached to that, and then choose something else. So here's a thought. This is a 100-year event. This is something that, I mean, we're never going to experience again in our lifetimes. Not that we'd wish it on anyone. This is a unique event in the last 100 years, right? When we think about the 1918 flu. How do you want to remember it? If you have, you know, for yourself, what do you want to do with your family, maybe? Because we can focus on the negative. It's all there, you know, at our disposal for all of us. And also, what else could we use this time if we chose to do something that's consistent with the stuff that we care about? Maybe it's thinking about, how do we really like connect with friends or family that maybe we haven't talked to. Maybe it's you get some downtime. Maybe you can make some downtime. Maybe you can walk slowly outside on a sunny day and really notice what it feels like to be outside, right? So there's a million different things to do, but if we're stuck trying to solve, fix, get certainty, you wouldn't notice any of that. And so flexibility is about noticing, what am I doing? Does it feel like a struggle, and is it helpful? Does it serve me? And if not, you can step back and choose to do something different. Choose a different intention, one that means more to you.
I love that, Lisa. I don't want to brag, but I kind of did that naturally on a trip to DC in 2010. We went, and it was the first time I was in DC, and there was construction on the reflecting pool, and it was empty. And my girlfriend at the time was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're finally in DC and the reflecting pool is empty." I'm like, "But how many people get to see it empty? Like, most people go and it's full. This is really exciting, an empty reflecting pool."
Well, that's like right now with everybody having Zoom Passovers, as I know people who were able to have Passover with family that they've never had Passover with, because they're able to connect with people in Australia and, you know, Europe and whatever. Ethan, I wanted to go back. Nikki made a comment, and I think it's so appropriate for everything we're talking about, both the mindfulness. Right, yeah, because Nikki, yeah, but I think it's a good. Nikki, I don't mean to call you out on it, but I think it's really good to go back to everybody, is that she stated that she was feeling really bad about herself because she was trying to concentrate and her attention was going and she wasn't able to concentrate. And that's the whole thing about self-compassion and mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is about not criticizing, but notice. So notice that my mind has wandered and bring it back. And then, you know, maybe Kim can talk about the self-compassion aspect about it.
I agree. And I'm going to stick with you a second, Michelle. So I'm gonna move forward through these a little bit faster. We're going to get deeper as we go here, so hold on tight. And thank you again for everyone who's commenting and continuing to stick with us. I love this conversation. So Kim touched on grief earlier, and we're all experiencing grief temporarily, hopefully, grieving our previous way of daily routine, and not only our day-to-day, but we're missing out on weddings and graduations and funerals, birth plans. And so Michelle, I asked your permission before this, but so Michelle is a new mother, and I was curious, like, what have you been experiencing in terms of, things that you may have been doing with your baby now that you're not getting to do, and like just in terms of grief and how you're coping and all that?
Yeah. So there's, I go back and forth every day, between the grieving of what my maternity leave was supposed to look like, all the, I wanted to join some new mom groups, and my grandmother lives not so far away from me, and my cousin and I were going to go over there on a weekly basis and visit with my grandmother, and hang out with friends and get to show off my newborn to family and friends. And Passover was supposed to be the first time everybody was going to, meet my son. But now I look at the fact that my husband gets quote unquote extra paternity time. I mean, he really is working, but he gets to come upstairs on a break, and we get to have lunch together, and he gets a lot more time with our baby, and he and I get more time together. So it's the constant grieving process. Every day I go through it. I don't get to hang out with friends, and other babies and all of that. But there are, as Lisa was saying, it's focusing on what we can do and what we have. There's so much about this that we have no control over, and there are things that I have control over, right? I can be present with my son. I can turn off my Facebook, although you wouldn't notice from all the pictures I posted about him. But, I can be present with him and play with him, and not worry that I have to go run to the supermarket, or I have to go meet up with somebody, or that I'm late because he just pooped and it's everywhere. So it's a constant battle. It's not the maternity leave I expected, but I get to connect with family a little bit more than I probably would have.
Perfect.
And I
Thanks,
get more
Michelle.
support. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. And I think we're all finding silver linings in this moment. We don't want this to be happening. We don't want people to be losing their lives, but at the same time, there are all silver linings that we're experiencing. Lisa, the people want to know what your dog's name is.
Her name is Lemon, after Liz Lemon. And many times a day we say, God, blanket, lemon. So I didn't curse. I didn't.
No, you didn't. You did.
And when life gives you lemons,
That's right.
You get a dog.
Oh, somebody said, one of my friends said, she has to be a therapy dog like your other one, because then she'll be lemonade.
Oh, yeah,
that's awesome.
So moving right along here, we talk a lot about values and following our values, but in some cases, the way we followed our values before, those don't seem available to us. For instance, like I made a point of being social and hanging out with friends at least once or twice a week. I wrote or going to the gym, but Michelle will laugh. I try to go. I literally, I don't have my keys. I literally joined a gym 3 days before everything shut down. So this could potentially be my fault.
I caused it. I made you do it.
Yeah. But how important is it to find creative ways to continually following our values and attaining goals we've set for ourselves? How important is it to get creative right now?
One thing I say to clients, and I'll throw this to you, Lisa, but one thing in general that I say to clients is that there is no one way. It's not like from A to Z that I accomplish values, and values are not things that you can cross off a list, right? Goal is something you can cross off a list. I accomplished that. I had a baby. Great. I did that. Unless of course we want more, but I got up and I showered and did my hair today. That's a goal. I'm able to cross that off a list. But values are the way we live. And so it's constantly changing in many ways that we can move ourselves towards our values. It's not just one way. So even if those, our normal ways of doing it are not there, we still have other opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And just to totally, highlight everything that Michelle said, it's a value isn't a goal. It's not something you can attain. It's a quality of action. It's more about an intention, right? So the ways that we can follow them are totally constrained, but the intentions don't have to change. And so it's just kind of chunking it in smaller pieces. right? So for example, one of my values is to be of service, right? It just makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I have a purpose. I feel I'm willing to do a lot of hard things if I can be of service. I'm willing to take a lot of criticism, to learn how to better be of service, just so I can do it well. So I might not be able to, I don't know, be seeing my clients in person, but I can show up anyway online, and I can acknowledge this isn't perfect, and maybe this is harder, maybe it's better for some, but I can still show up and do it. So one way to think about it is think about what would you like your best self to be? What are the qualities you might have, right? What are the qualities you might embody? What's is sort of being mindful one of them? Can you act in a way that you're really connected with that? If you care about your family, can you act in a way that's really connected with that? And maybe it's a tiny thing. Maybe it's letting them sleep in when they've had a stressful day. Maybe it's like doing the dishes when you don't really feel like it. Little stuff like that. But one thing I think that's really helpful is to really notice when you're doing those small things, for someone else. I think that to me is something that's really reinforcing about noticing that.
I like that, Lisa. Thank you. I'm going to deviate from the questions that I wrote real quickly because I've seen it on Facebook a bunch, and somebody's asking now, Maria, actually. So, Kim, I'm going to throw this to you. When there's a pandemic, when there's a virus, and people are suffering and dying, this is a judgment question, meaning judging ourselves. But is it okay to be grateful for certain things right now? Is it okay that we feel grateful? I've seen some shaming online about how can you possibly look for the silver linings right now and the good things? What is your take on that?
Right. So I'm going to give you two different takes, and they're going to probably contradict each other, but that's cool, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. The way that I frame this is, yes, we're in a time where people are losing jobs and people are passing away and getting sick. And we could very easily say now is not the time to look for silver linings and not the time to be grateful. But I think the thing to really remember here is people have been dying and losing their jobs and having grief for thousands of years. It's just that we didn't know about it, and it wasn't on the news, and maybe we weren't going through it. And we were in those moments, those people who were struggling were also allowed to access gratitude, empathy, and whatever they're feeling, right? So 100%, you're allowed to be grateful during this time. In fact, a lot of research is going to show that that's going to be one of the main things that will help you with resiliency during this time, to be grateful. On the flip side of this, I'm always very careful, even to go back to your last question, is to drop all the expectations on you having to do anything, right? Like now is not the time to learn Spanish, in my opinion. You can, and if you have the capacity for that, I admire you. But if you don't come out of this learning Spanish, or if you don't come out of this feeling grateful, or if you don't come out of this finding one silver lining, that's still okay too, right? I think that there are these two conflicting views on this, right? It's like Michelle is a dear friend of mine, and she's always so positive, and I'm like always like, oh, poor Kimberly, you know what I mean? And so my way is so much different to hers. Neither is right? It's just we cope in different ways, and that's fine. And we can also give ourselves permission to have two opposing feelings at the same time. We can be grieving and joyful at the same time, because that is grief. We only grieve things because there was love and joy. You need the love and joy to get there. And so I think if we can sort of let this be very, very messy, like we talked before, I feel is a way we can get out of this without too much judgment.
And I think, that's a great point, Kim, is I think you're talking about acceptance and respecting other people's process and how to cope. And that's what, the things we're seeing online is like, well, what are you doing? You should make the most of this time. You're home. You have nothing to do. Learn that language. Do that thing. And that may be right for some people, but for other people it's not, and we shouldn't shame people for processing this and handling this the way that they need to for themselves.
Right.
Lemon got sour.
If I would just add one thing to your last question, Ethan, about finding things to do when your values have changed. Sometimes when you're having a hard time finding values, I would shift your attention to curiosity and just have it be there. Because, in a time where we're flooded with anxiety, some people struggle to find values. So sometimes it's just like, okay, I'm going to knit and I'll see whether I like that. I'm going to draw a picture or color in or bake a cake. And I'm going to be curious about whether that makes me feel good or not. So instead of it being like, I used to love the gym and now I have to do the gym inside, it might be, okay, let's see what else I'm curious about.
I like that, Kim. Thank you. I'm going to keep moving forward.
That.
There's a couple questions I really want to get to. I'll probably toss this out to Lisa to start, but this is a question that I really wanted to address, whether it relates to everyone or not, but I wanted to approach it from this perspective. So it's really, really important. Kim talked about we can't compare each other's pain. We can't.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just thinking, like, when you guys were talking before, just to bring it back to that.
Yeah, we touched a little bit on that. One person's struggle doesn't negate our own. Okay, and I was actually had a question here to elaborate on this, but if we can integrate it into this question, which is, I want to actually discuss for people's. We are all four very fortunate right now. We come from a place of a bit of a privileged circumstance where we can work from home. We have a savings, we have a roof, we have food on the table, we have safety and security. But there are literally millions of people right now facing losing everything, their businesses, their money. We saw lines outside food banks in New York City because people can't afford to buy groceries. And so it's important to never minimize anyone's own personal experience and pain that they're going through. But I really wanted to talk to, for those whose current situation is more dire in tangible ways, whose present moment is no food or no money, whose present worst nightmare is not perhaps in the future, but now. What are ways that they can cope and continue to move forward?
I think one of the probably the most important things is to just, notice everybody's doing the best that they can. And we are really privileged when I think about, the luxury of being able to stay home. When I'm reading stories about, workers in the poultry plants that are dying because they're being told that they've had to go back to work. And, that we have, with rates of COVID, it's affecting communities of color much more than the communities that are white. And I think that we really have to acknowledge that. And in terms of handling things, I think it's just being aware, and for those of us who are privileged, maybe it would be a good thing to do what we can to support others in other communities, whether it's reaching out just, to check in with friends, whether it's, helping, in other ways. I think it's really, really hard. So just not comparing, not shaming, and certainly acknowledging and holding all of that. That's another form of acceptance, noticing that like one of the things that shows up for me a lot when I think about this is like, I feel so powerless to do anything to help, and it's really hard because it just makes me so sad, and I'm carrying that grief around a lot. And one of the first things I think that we talked about, I think it was Kim, was loving kindness. And I'm, more along the lines of the Buddhist version of that. But I think about spending a little time each day sending out loving kindness to communities that are really struggling, to the first responders, to healthcare workers. I'm terrified every time I see one of my friends who's a nurse or doctor, having to kind of make it in. One of my friends I just saw on Facebook is a retired nurse, and she just went back. She was a retired ER nurse, and she just went back. And I just thought, oh my God, is she going to be okay? So you can use these practices that we're teaching you today to send out some loving kindness in the world. And just sitting, and letting your attention rest on those groups, even if that's all you can do. That's a huge thing. Just taking a few moments out of your day.
Michelle, if you're in one of those groups and you're feeling completely overwhelmed, do the tools and skills that we've literally been talking about the last hour plus still apply?
Yeah, I think they do, because it's again just kind of bringing yourself back. It's giving yourself some compassion for being sad or feeling whatever feelings you're feeling about not being able to be home, or losing more and more loved ones, or whatever it may be, and saying to yourself, gosh, why me? Why my group of friends or family? And just kind of being there with that.
Kim, I'm going to bring this back to what you said earlier, which is the comparing people's pain. What do you say to people that are possibly in families or in large groups, quarantined? They're all dealing with it differently. And somebody may say to someone else, well, you could have it a lot worse. Look at so-and-so and what they're going through. What do you say to that? Let's dive a little bit more into comparing struggles, and are all struggles valid?
Right. And you're asking, what would I say, like actually verbally, or how do I respond to that?
How would you respond to that, and maybe a suggestion on how to approach that if you're being shamed sort of for how you're dealing with your, yeah.
Right. Well, clinically, we could look at a phenomenon that happens quite regularly, which is called toxic positivity, where, there are some people who can't hold space for other people's pain when they talk about pain. And so they always try to create some positivity in, so the example would be if you said, I'm really struggling right now, I'm having a really hard time dealing with it. And they'd say, well, look at how much you've got to be grateful for, or look at, you're not dying, and so forth. That can be very, very jarring and send us into a shame spiral. And so I think that our job in that moment when someone has said that is, for me, I usually just have a moment where I'm like, that isn't because I'm wrong. That was because they couldn't hold my pain right now. And that's okay, because some of us can't hold everybody's pain right now, right? Sometimes we just have to do the best we can, and people are well-intentioned. They mightn't be meaning to hurt you, but they did. And so if someone were to say that to me, I would just take a moment and be like, okay, it was too much for them to contain my pain right now, right? Whether at the end of the day, this is where I get really bossy, is at the end of the day, everyone deserves to have suffering. That is the way we have been built, that is the whole phenomenon around, who we are as humans. We get through hard things. And so, from my perspective, I'm going on a tangent here, but I'll come back, I promise, is the thing that I think gets people down the most about themselves is that they say to themselves, I can't handle this, right? The thing that I think gets the hardest is when we say we can't handle it. So even if people are really, really dealing with the side effects of COVID, what can often be the thing that doesn't hold them up is this faulty belief system that they can't handle it. And we can, right? We can hold a tremendous amount of pain as human beings. So to come back to your question is, how would you speak to them? You might say that, I really appreciate your thought, but at this point, I'm really trying to just meet myself where I am. Or, if someone was trying to, or you might just say, thank you. If they're a person who aren't going to listen to it, because if you're really sure they can't hold space for you, you might just move on and find somebody else who can contain and hold your space.
Great. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. I see some questions. Yes, for those of you that are just tuning in, this is recorded. It will live on Facebook, YouTube, and we'll also put a link to the landing page where the town hall will be for a week, so everybody can replay and watch. There's a lot of good nuggets of information. We are closing in on the final hour, final minutes. I want to wrap up sort of where we began with a final question, which is, nighttime is so hard for so many. It's a time where we're most likely alone with our thoughts, and all the what ifs creep in, and from what might happen to, am I doing enough and being enough? So what are some healthy approaches to going to sleep and falling asleep? Words. falling asleep, especially with so much dread and anticipatory anxiety about the next day. Michelle.
So again, I'm going to repeat myself, but this is no different than pre-COVID days. Good sleep habits start with a routine, not an OCD routine, but a routine of, shutting off social media and news and screens an hour before bedtime. Start to read, do something that calms you down, listen to some relaxing music, get ready for bed. And maybe do a mindfulness exercise or a breathing exercise to prepare you for the night. The less you can amp yourself up right before bed, the easier it will be, ideally, to fall asleep. And also, I think that influences when we wake up in the morning. If we're seeing all this nasty stuff right before we go to bed, it's going to seep into our dreams and it's going to make us more anxious in the morning.
I mean, mindfulness is really important when going to bed because it's so easy to worry about the next day, and our brain are just focused on the next day as opposed to being present. And Lisa, any thoughts on bedtime, whether it's either getting ready for bed or laying in bed with your thoughts, or even if you're having nightmares and how to cope with those and wanting to go to sleep or stay asleep?
I would echo every single thing that Michelle said, and I think that things that I think are helpful sometimes also would be, I really like, there are apps you can download with, I love the ocean. So mine, if I'm stressed, I've got the waves, and you can do waves or rain or whatever. I love those. And with the, with worried thoughts, and this is something that I hear quite a lot, especially in the kids and teens that I work with, having a comforting routine at bedtime, just the same way that Michelle said, is very, very important. And then practicing maybe that little thought diffusion exercise that we did earlier, thought watching, like it's, fish in an aquarium, pretend your thoughts are fish. The other thing is, notice if your mind is time traveling, to the future, what's going to happen tomorrow. Oh God, all the things I did not so well during the day, and see if you could bring it back to the comfort of the present moment. And another thing that, Tara, I think I want to attribute this to Tara Brock. I think it's something that she said also is, anxiety doesn't live long in the current moment. So it's really interesting when you think about that. So what I would say is get curious about what happens when I bring my attention to this moment right now. And if I notice my mind pulling me into the future, the moment I notice that, I just kind of gently acknowledge it, bring it back. If I'm ruminating about something, gently acknowledge it, bring it back. And notice that your mind, when it gives you those anxious thoughts, it's just what minds do. All of our minds do that. And, they can be, the content might differ, the intensity might differ, and my stuff isn't the same as your stuff, but they work the same way. And so just noticing that process can be helpful, I think, at nighttime.
Kim, any last thoughts on sleep?
Well, of course, you guys are expecting me to say, this is the time to be self-compassionate, right? Of course, you didn't get everything done you wanted to. And of course, things didn't go as well, or you didn't communicate things like you wished you had it. And so I think this is where your practice can really shine. And to speak off of Lisa, there are some amazing guided meditations on self-compassion. If you feel completely clueless on it, by all means, sometimes they are the best places to go, and I use them myself. On the flip side, and I will disclose, I am not a medical doctor, but I also want to just say, if this is a last statement from me, is there is no shame on asking a doctor for medication if in fact you're really struggling, particularly with sleep. I'm not pro-med or anti-med. All I'm wanting to do is to take the stigma out of it, is that if you are really struggling and the tools that you've been given still aren't working, it's not because you're doing anything wrong per se. It's just that this is an incredibly stressful time. And so if you are really struggling and you're not getting the sleep you need, you can reach out to your doctor and ask him if it's him or her, if it's appropriate for you to be supplemented there. Again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not advising medical information, but there is no shame in asking for help.
I love that. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm getting a weird call on my phone. Do you guys hear that noise?
Yes.
Oh no.
Well, my dogs are barking. So it's
It
okay.
reminds me of FaceTime, Facebook, like messenger calls.
No, somebody's trying to video Facebook message me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to
is.
shut it off because it doesn't come up. He's going to probably try again. Whatever. So Lemon doesn't appreciate. So we'll go 2 minutes over. Just real quickly, I want to give everybody just a quick 1 minute, like presidential debate style, 1 minute final thought. Michelle, we can start with you.
I think just be present as much as you can. Give yourself permission to fail. I don't like the word fail, but give yourself permission to not be perfect and to be present with your family.
Lisa.
Social anxiety. Oh my God. Okay. So I was just thinking about one of the things that one of my mentors said to me, Kelly Wilson, is he wrote this in my daughter's like a little journal that he gave her when she was going to college. And because I asked friends and people that we knew to write her advice. And he wrote, "I hope you are a person who can learn how to fall." And I love that because we are all through this going to fall down. We're not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy. It's going to be hard. And we're all in it together. So make a space for all of that and, be kind to yourself along the way.
Thank you, Lisa. Kim.
Is it okay if I use the one I used last time?
Of course.
Okay, so here I'll get my little spiel out. Most of you who know me know that my saying for all things is it's a beautiful day to do hard things. I'm going to say it right now because we have been training for this. The hard things that you have been doing has been you exercising the muscle so that you can continue to do hard things. Now, the only reason I say it's a beautiful day is because in every moment we can find some knowledge or some wisdom in the hard thing that we do. Most of our growing comes from when things absolutely fall apart. And so all I would add here is it is a beautiful day to do hard things. So, get behind yourself and, believe in yourself a little because we can do hard things.
Thank you, Kim. All right. So everybody, thank you so much for attending. I want to thank our guests, Michelle, Lisa, and Kim, for taking some time out of their Saturday to join us. You will find links and resources to all of their social media in comment threads and also on Facebook or in our landing page, which we have links throughout, as well as we will also put some resources to some of the content that everybody was talking about. Also, I always want to thank the IOCDF for hosting, and I want to thank Fran for being behind the scenes, working his digital voodoo. If you are a clinician, check out the IOCDF's Education Staycation. They have tons of programming and town halls for clinician. Finally, just on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll be back with our final Kids, Teens, and Family Support Group. Unfortunately, we will be losing this one, but we will be gaining this one. And so we are trading in. So if your family kids are keen, family friends or keen, if you got some people and family in your house, then you can join. This is long-term medication use. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But it's a G-friendly support group, and I highly recommend everybody to tune in. That's Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Also, if you haven't already and you want to be notified about all IOCDF programming this month, next month, future months, definitely subscribe on our YouTube and Facebook pages. You will be notified it's all reversed. You'll be notified when and where. So thank you. Definitely follow us if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and we will keep you updated. Finally, thank you so much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. Go through the comment threads. A lot of people left great comments. As always, I love to see you all advocating for yourself. It means a lot for you that you join us and spend your time with us and be here with us. Any questions at all, support anything, head over to the IOCDF.org website. You can also email them. And as always, I always urge you, I'm using always a lot, but I like always email me at justethan@iocdf.org. I will always get back to your email. Always. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. It's a beautiful day to do hard things. Feel all the feels. Don't judge. Be a river. Hit the rock. You can suck. Be minus. Do it all. Great afternoon. See you later. Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye. It's a beautiful day to do hard things.
One thing at a time.